Kia ora tātou katoa. There is nothing unique about the method of Jesus' execution, crucifixion. The Romans used it across the empire to discourage dissent. Unlike other forms of torture, the victims were nailed or strung up on 2 bits of wood. A public humiliation, a public display as a deterrent. The cross was a symbol of the regime, of Roman control and might, and the violence used to keep that regime in power. And it was not just the Romans that used crucifixion. There's also nothing unique about the reason for such an end, the reason being rebellion, in whatever form, against Roman rule and governance. The victims were enemies of the state. So it wasn't used if someone was a nuisance, or a thief, or a blasphemer, or if someone was of the higher classes and had influence. Rather, it was used when a lowborn had transgressed the boundary of power and challenged the might of the almighty Rome. And the message to the victims' followers was, you too will end up like this if you dare to do likewise. All the accounts we have of Jesus' end, whether in the New Testament or other sources, indicate that he did not take up the sword, i.e. engage in armed rebellion, or encourage others to do so. Maybe this was realpolitik, for confronting Rome with military means led to a quick and painful end, as other would-be messiahs had discovered. Or maybe it was because, as some of his followers wrote up in the synoptic gospels, because Jesus believed in bringing peace by dissolving the dichotomies of otherness, friend versus foe, Jew versus Gentile, them versus us, and said he saw all people as one family, connected, related in God, where equity and mutuality were the norm. It is likely that Jesus' words and actions, albeit filtered via the scriptures that have come down to us, led to his death. His indiscriminate healing practices, his parable of inverting normative expectations around hierarchy and justice, his inclusive table, open table, his non-violent active resistance to the mythology of Rome. Not only did this threaten many in the religious establishment, but in the Roman province of Palestine, it threatened the political overlords too. All this I write as a precursor to theologies of atonement. Namely, what is the meaning of Jesus' death, and what did his death achieve? Very apt questions in the season of Lent, and questions that have divided Christians like none other. And then there's the sequel too, namely, what is the meaning of his resurrection, whatever you believe about that, and what does that mean, that his meanings mean for today? Well, those questions we'll hold on to till after Easter. Regarding atonement, firstly, I would ask, does death, especially tragic death, have to have a meaning? Sometimes many things, just happen. We're not in control, and neither is any deity, though we wish it were so. As an aside, I think it has been increasingly difficult in the last 100 years or more to justify the notion of an omnipotent deity in control. Such a deity would have caused countless and some terrible deaths of innocents and others. Instead, many of us have had to reimagine and re-envision a totally different understanding of God. Not a planner and controller, or a judge or ruler, but a non-anthropomorphic presence in which we exist and draw sustenance from. Secondly, finding meaning in death can also be framed as coming to terms with loss. There's little doubt that loss is magnified when you believe you could have prevented it, or slowed it, or stopped it. And you might be right. And so the regret, the guilt, and the pain linger. This may have driven some of Jesus' followers to search their scriptures to find both meaning and solace. There's little doubt, too, that the Hebrew Bible did become a resource and shaped the thinking of those who sought meaning in his death. The idea of a scapegoat, a sacrifice, and other notions, like of the suffering servant in 2 Isaiah, one who would endure not because that one had done any wrong, but because we, Jesus' followers, but also Israel as a whole, had done wrong. Such thinking came to prominence. It's from a cluster of ideas like this that Christianity bred and spread the notion that Jesus died as a kind of blood sacrifice to save us from our sins. And then its logical follow-ons, namely that we are sinners in need of saving, and that God is not only a judge, but one who is seemingly appeased by blood sacrifice. The latter idea, which is quite bizarre. There's also little doubt that Jesus' closest followers took words and phrases from their Jewish tradition, like resurrection, like Messiah, Christ, and like Son of God, and hitched their hopes to them. They understood such words, as most Jews did, as triumphalist power words, promises of a future when a new king would rule over a new Israel in that colonized and suffering land of Palestine. Later, as decades passed, some writers in the New Testament and elsewhere repurposed these hopes into an imaginary afterlife kingdom, where justice ruled, the righteous were rewarded, and the wicked punished. Those we dislike getting their comeuppance is a universal longing, but I would suggest has little to do with Jesus or his God. Thirdly, and lastly, as I've alluded to, I think the grand theories of atonement construct conceptual universes that do the God of Jesus a disservice. I don't think Jesus wanted us to imagine that God viewed us primarily as sinners or in need of redemption. Rather, he wanted us to imagine God loving us, always loving us, as we are, warts and all. Just as like we who are privileged to be parents or grandparents love our children and grandchildren unreservedly, unconditionally. Sure, people, including us at times, do bad stuff, even wicked stuff. But that doesn't mean that the essence of God is not unconditional love, that the essence is not always working to include and restore and empower. Similarly, I don't think Jesus wanted us to think that God killed his son or would ever kill any son, daughter, child, or person for any reason whatsoever. There never was a predetermined grand plan to save the world by having Roman henchmen murder Jesus. Because from a perspective of morals, that would make God into a filicidal monster. So contra John 3:16, God did not send Jesus to die so that we might be saved. The whole framing of God in that verse is wrong. God is not up and we down. God does not send and we receive. Rather, to paraphrase Paul, God is that, or who, in which we live and move and have our being. Or to paraphrase Eckhart, God is closer than the air we breathe. We are in God. All is in God. Jesus and others are teachers and exemplars of that understanding. It is the love that Jesus showed and expounded that informs our notion of God. It is the love which is the plumb line of our theology, including the theology and the theological statements in the Bible. Is God a judge? No. We judge ourselves in the mirror of love called God. And we often find ourselves lacking, failing. But we misunderstand at that point the essence of God. For the purpose of that mirror of love is not guilt and shame, but restoration and empowerment. To use the familial metaphor again, God is like the mother who desires always the best for us and our siblings. Another way of answering that question, is God a judge, is to say, as psychotherapists might, no, we make God into a judge. We create a God to reward and punish us. We make a God who has chosen and unchosen people. We create a God who makes a heaven and a hell. We make a God who will condemn us because we are frightened of knowing ourselves as beautiful, wonderful, and magnificent. Right now, right here. We are frightened of being all that we truly are. Similarly, are we sinners? Is this our fundamental failing from which the portrayal of Jesus as sacrifice and God as judge has to redeem us? Or has this bad theology, worse psychology, about our so-called fallen state as human beings so distorted the Christian and societal understanding of God and humanity, scarring numerous people, both inside and outside the church, that a moratorium should be put on the words sinner, sin, and saved? Are those words just too damaging to use without lengthy, qualifying explanations? I am not a sinner. Sin is not ontologically who I am, and I refuse to be defined by such a word. And I do not need to be saved by a sacrifice Jesus on a cross. I do need to be loved, empowered, and encouraged. And this need is met by the love of family and friends, love of community, love of creation, love and through all manner of people and circumstances, through which the surprising, discombobulating love called God is revealed and known. I do not believe in a God of power and control who schemes and plans, has favorites, predetermines outcomes, blesses chosen people, causes others, including beloved sons, daughters, to die. I don't want to be saved, especially if it means someone else has to suffer. I don't think the violent deaths of great people like Jesus ever serve a good purpose. For the Bible and religion are strong on the mythology of violence. Winners, losers, insiders, outsiders, saved, unsaved. And it's much weaker on the mythology of mutual relation, of the whole earth being one family, of all people being joined together as one body, that when one suffers, all suffer, and when one is loved, all rejoice. It is this weaker mythology that our world now so badly needs. For the deeply entrenched patterns of violence, subjugation, and dominance are destroying our communities, our countries, our planet, destroying us all. I believe in God, who is our home for all, whose only language is love, who is repulsed by violence, who longs for connection, and is indeed the threads of hope that sew us together. In this, I believe. Blessings to you this week.